And so I was thinking, oh my God, now the photographs in my head, the pictures, the children being ripped out of the arms of their parents.
At 83, Barbra Streisand isn't interested in being discreet anymore. She spent a lifetime mastering discipline, control, and perfection, but now she's choosing honesty instead. When asked which men ever truly tempted her, Barbra didn't dodge the question. She smiled, and then she told the truth. Over decades in Hollywood and music, she crossed paths with legends, men whose voices, presence, and quiet confidence made even her famous self-control feel fragile. This isn't gossip, and it's not about what happened. It's about what almost did. Barbra admits there were 7 men who tested her restraint, some she worked beside, some she only brushed past, and a few who lived only in her imagination. Each one left a mark. Each one represented a different kind of temptation. Now, with nothing left to protect and no image left to polish, Barbra Streisand finally names them and reveals why. Sometimes, the fantasies you resist stay with you longer than the ones you live out. Number 1. Bob Dylan. Temptation of the mind. Bob Dylan was never polished, never smooth, and never predictable. And that was exactly what made him dangerous. Barbra Streisand didn't describe him as handsome in the traditional sense. She described him as unavoidable. When Dylan entered a room, he didn't command attention, he quietly bent it toward himself. What drew Barbra in was his mind. Dylan's lyrics weren't songs so much as riddles. They peeled layers off the listener, exposing thoughts and desires most people kept buried. He didn't sing to impress. He sang to reveal. And being around him felt like being slowly undressed without a single touch. Barbra admitted she often imagined what it would be like if he leaned close and whispered one of his verses directly to her. Not shouted, not performed, whispered. The kind of intimacy that feels more dangerous than physical closeness. Dylan didn't seduce with gestures or charm. He seduced by making you feel understood in ways that unsettled you. With him, it wouldn't have been romance. It would have been chaos unplanned, intellectual, electric, the kind of night that rewires how you think rather than how you feel. And that mystery stayed with her, because some temptations don't fade with time, they deepen. Bob Dylan represented the seduction of intellect, and once your mind is captured, the rest often follows. Number 2. Kris Kristofferson, the outlaw poet. Kris Kristofferson carried temptation in his voice. It was rough, gravelly, and imperfect, and that imperfection was the point. Barbra didn't see him as a polished star. She saw him as a man shaped by dust, distance, and late-night confessions sung into half-empty rooms. His songs didn't entertain. They exposed. Each lyric felt like a secret shared too honestly. When he sang, it wasn't for the crowd. It felt like it was for one person at a time. And that made standing near him dangerous. Barbra admitted there was something about his presence that made rules feel optional. The cowboy swagger, the half-open shirt, the eyes that carried regret and mischief at the same time. He wasn't asking permission, he was daring you to step closer. What made Kristofferson so tempting wasn't confidence, it was vulnerability. He sang like someone who had already made every mistake and survived them, and that kind of honesty pulls people in. It makes you want to confess things you never planned to say out loud. With Kris, temptation wasn't flashy. It was slow, and it lingered long after the song ended. Number 3. Neil Diamond. Fire in the recording booth. Neil Diamond was danger disguised as professionalism. On the surface, it was just music, 2 voices in a recording booth, microphones perfectly placed, lyrics rehearsed. But underneath, there was tension. The kind you can hear if you listen closely. Barbra and Neil's duet, "You Don't Bring Me Flowers," wasn't acting, not entirely. Every harmony carried a push and pull that went beyond performance. When Neil leaned into a line, Barbra felt it not as a note, but as a presence. His voice had weight, a deep, textured sound that wrapped around her and stayed there. Every glance through the glass felt deliberate. Every pause felt charged. She admitted there were moments when she forgot the heartbreak they were supposed to be portraying and felt something much closer to heat. Neil Diamond knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't rush. He let the tension build, letting the silence between lines say as much as the lyrics themselves, and that made staying professional harder than it should have been. Sometimes the most tempting moments don't happen under bright lights. They happen in quiet rooms, behind closed doors, where everything feels personal. Number 4. Frank Sinatra. Power in a tuxedo. Frank Sinatra didn't enter a room, he changed it. The lighting seemed lower, the air felt thicker, and suddenly, everything slowed down. Barbra Streisand described him not as a man, but as an atmosphere. Sinatra's danger wasn't just his voice, it was how he used it. He sang like he already knew your weaknesses, like he was daring you to react. One glance while holding a note could make you forget where you were. One martini slid across the table could make you think bad ideas were excellent ones. Performing with Frank felt less like collaboration and more like a duel. He'd throw a line her way, smooth and deliberate, locking eyes as if challenging her to keep up. And sometimes, she admitted, she let herself get swept into it. Frank didn't chase. He waited. He let his confidence do the work. And that confidence controlled, practiced, effortless was intoxicating. Frank Sinatra was temptation wrapped in elegance, and resisting him required focus few people ever managed to maintain. Number 5. Marvin Gaye. Desire sung aloud. Marvin Gaye didn't need to move to seduce anyone. His voice did all the work. When he sang, it felt physical, like it was touching you without permission. Barbra Streisand described his sound as silk poured directly into the room. Songs like Let's Get It On and Sexual Healing weren't metaphors, they were invitations. Marvin didn't hide behind suggestion. He leaned into intimacy and made listeners lean with him. Barbra admitted that listening to Marvin made restraint feel unnecessary. The slower he sang, the harder it became to stay grounded. He didn't chase desire. He waited for it to come to him, and it always did. What made Marvin so dangerous was his softness. He didn't dominate. He drew people in. And once you were there, the idea of leaving felt almost impossible. She regretted never sharing a studio with him. Because she knew it wouldn't have been a duet. It would have been foreplay. Marvin Gaye didn't just sing about desire. He embodied it. Number 6. Elvis Presley. The weight of a legend. Elvis Presley was temptation amplified by myth. Barbra Streisand never worked with him, but she didn't need to. His presence alone was enough. When Elvis entered a room, people didn't just notice, they froze. There was danger in his confidence. In the curl of his lip. In the way his eyes didn't just look at you, they chose you. That look carried promise and trouble in equal measure. Barbra admitted she dreamed about singing with him. Imagined what it would feel like to share a microphone, his voice wrapping around hers, the lights dimmed low. She suspected she would have forgotten every note she ever practiced. Elvis wasn't just a man. He was an event, a force that pulled people out of themselves, and that kind of power made resistance feel futile. Elvis Presley was temptation in rhinestones. And if he had ever called her backstage, she knew she wouldn't have walked, she would have run. Number 7. Robert Redford, the one that got away. Robert Redford wasn't the loudest temptation. He was the quietest, and that made him the most haunting. Working together, Barbra felt a chemistry that went far beyond the script. Their connection wasn't explosive, it was constant. Redford's confidence wasn't showy. It was effortless. The way he leaned back, the way he listened, the way he looked at her like he was about to share a secret meant only for her. It made the line between acting and reality dangerously thin. Barbra admitted this was her greatest regret. Not because it happened, but because it didn't. They stayed professional. They behaved. And that restraint, over time, turned into longing. She remembered one moment between takes when he began humming just casually. And it nearly undid her. Not a song, just a sound. And it stayed with her for decades. Some desires don't burn out. They settle in. Robert Redford was the one that got away. And sometimes, that's the temptation that lasts the longest. At 83, Barbra Streisand isn't looking for approval. She's already earned it. What makes these confessions powerful isn't the fame of the men she names. The world already knows who they are. What matters is what those moments reveal about her. A woman who lived surrounded by temptation, creativity, and desire, yet chose when to step forward and when to hold back. Barbra doesn't speak with regret. She speaks with clarity. She understands now that wanting isn't weakness. Feeling the pull doesn't erase discipline. In fact, resisting temptation often requires more strength than giving in. And throughout her life, she stood at that edge more than most, on film sets, in recording booths, under stage lights where chemistry had nowhere to hide. Each of these 7 men represented something different: intellect, mystery, power, vulnerability, heat, legend, longing. Some temptations burned brightly and passed, others never fully faded, and a few, the quiet ones, the restrained ones, stayed with her the longest, because sometimes what doesn't happen leaves the deepest mark. Barbra Streisand didn't build her legacy by denying desire. She built it by understanding it, by knowing herself well enough to choose when fantasy was sweeter than reality, by recognizing that not every fire needs to be touched to leave warmth behind. Now, in the calm that comes with age, she can finally say what most people never admit out loud. Some of the most powerful love stories are the ones that live only in memory, and perhaps that's the truth at the heart of it all. Not every temptation is meant to be acted on, but every temptation, faced honestly, teaches us who we are. If you want to hear more untold confessions from the legends who shaped generations, make sure to subscribe and stay with us. The most honest stories are often the ones told last.